Welcome to Teddy's Nightmares. Tonight, we're venturing into the darkness of the wild where eerie whispers among the pines and unexplained figures transform serene camping trips into stories of survival and dread. From the silent circles of Mount Hiraeth to the unsettling smiles of shadowy strangers, join us as we peel back the veil of the unknown. Get ready to question what lurks beyond the campfire's glow. But before we start, subscribe to our channel. Let's begin. Story 1. I'm Patrick, and there's a story I've kept to myself for too long, one that haunts my dreams to this day. It happened during an autumn camping trip in the dense, shadowy woods of Pennsylvania, where the horizon is swallowed by towering pines and the nights are as dark as the deepest abyss. We were a group of college friends, emboldened by youth and the thrill of adventure. Our destination was a secluded campsite, a hidden gem known only to a few avid hikers, where the stars seemed to dip low enough to touch and the lake mirrored the moon's pale glow. We had set up our tents on a small clearing, the lake to our front and the encroaching forest to our back. As dusk painted the sky in streaks of red and purple, we noticed flickers of another fire across the lake, a group of strangers, close in age to us, their laughter carrying across the still water. The night was young, and the idea of meeting new people was appealing. We navigated around the lake's edge and introduced ourselves. The strangers welcomed us with open arms, offering drinks and stories. The firelight danced across their faces, creating a camaraderie that made us feel like long-lost friends reuniting. But as the night deepened, the atmosphere shifted. One of the guys, whose eyes had become glassy with too much drink, pulled from his backpack a hunting knife, long, serrated, and glinting ominously in the firelight. He boasted of its sharpness and how it could cut through bone as if it were butter. A shiver ran down my spine as he began to jab the knife into the ground, each thud a foreboding echo in the night. His friends laughed at first, but their laughter turned nervous as he became more erratic, slashing at the air and at invisible foes. My friends and I exchanged worried glances, the danger of the situation becoming increasingly apparent. Attempting to maintain a sense of normalcy, we tried to engage in other conversations, but the man's obsession with the knife was unnerving. He started to recount stories of hunters lost in these very woods, of accidents too gruesome to describe, and how he felt a kinship with the wilderness that bordered on the supernatural. It was when he began to carve symbols into the trees, symbols that seemed to twist and writhe in the firelight, that we decided to leave. We bid a hasty farewell, the unsettling images of the twisting symbols seared into our minds. Back at our campsite, we tried to laugh it off, but the mood had soured. We spoke in hushed tones about what those symbols could mean, about the history of these woods that locals whispered about. Stories of ancient rituals, of spirits that walked the forest, of campers who wandered off and were never seen again. The night grew quiet, the only sound the crackling of our dying fire and the distant lapping of water against the shore, until a scream shattered the calm. A scream so filled with terror that it seemed to freeze the very air. Then, silence. We emerged from our tents to see a chaos of lights across the lake, the other campsite now a frenzy of movement. Blue and red lights flickered between the trees, and we could hear the distant but unmistakable sound of sirens. In the morning, the rangers would come by our camp, asking if we'd seen anything, if we'd talked to the man with the knife. They wouldn't say much, but their somber faces told us all we needed to know. Something horrific had occurred, something that would remain a whispered legend of these woods. We packed up and left as quickly as we could, the dense forest now feeling like a trap rather than a retreat. The memory of that night, the knife gleaming in the firelight, and the symbols, those haunting, twisting symbols, would never leave me. They say the woods are quiet now, but I know better. I know the darkness that lingers there, waiting, and I'll never step foot in those woods again. Story 2. This past weekend unfolded into a night I'll never quite shake off. My partner and I trekked up to our secret gem of a campsite nestled high in the mountains. It's a spot that's off the beaten path, so secluded that you hardly ever spot another soul. We've never found it completely deserted, though, until now. We set up our usual cozy retreat, the air filled with the crackle of the campfire and the comforting familiarity of our ritual, food, beers, and the soft snores of my parents' aging dog, who we brought along for company. The solitude was so absolute this time, not a single fisher or hunter in sight. It felt different, but we welcomed the peace. As dusk crept in and the stars began their nightly show, we settled in. But our old, usually docile dog was suddenly on edge, hackles raised, eyes locked on the dense wall of forest around us. Despite the heat, he refused to calm down inside the tent, so we left the flap open, hoping the mountain breeze through the mesh would soothe him. His unease was palpable, and it infected us. We tried to reassure ourselves, returning to the fire's side, hoping fatigue would take over. But his growls only deepened, a primal sound that raised the hair on the back of my neck. Grasping the hunting knife and axe, we strained our ears against the silence of the mountain, the tension thick around us. For hours, we sat in vigil, our dog's alarm our only guide. Finally, seeking some semblance of security, we flooded our camp with the truck's headlights. The dog settled momentarily, only to erupt again, barking furiously into the night. That's when we bolted to the truck, hearts racing, not waiting to confront whatever lurked just beyond sight. We sat there, cocooned in the false safety of the truck, waiting for a sign, a sound, anything. But the wilderness kept its secrets, the only hint of life being the distant chorus of wolves, their howls a haunting backdrop to our vigil. Then, just as we dared to breathe, a crack of a branch nearby sent us scrambling. We didn't wait this time. We drove through the night, leaving behind the howls and the unknown menace. We heard stories of cougars in the area, stealthy predators that could take you unaware. Our imaginations ran wild with what might have been stalking our camp. Back home, we faced ridicule, branded as cowards, but I couldn't shake the protective instinct over our tiny, brave companion. They didn't understand. The mountain had whispered a warning, and we had listened. It's a decision I'll never regret, choosing safety over pride. The wilderness is unforgiving, and sometimes fear is the wisest counselor. Story 3. My name's Ben, and I'm a keen adventurer from Australia. Down in the southeastern part of the country is Victoria's high country, an expansive, wild terrain of mountain ranges and deep valleys, mostly traversed by 4WD and known for its isolation. It's a paradise for off-roaders, hunters, and hikers alike. My partner, Jess, and I chose this rugged wonderland for a multi-day camping trip, far from the digital world. Our 4WD was meticulously prepped with supplies, our route double-checked, and the local authorities informed, a precaution for those venturing solo into this vast wilderness. Our destination was the secluded Wangara Valley, an immense natural amphitheater surrounded by imposing alpine peaks with a serene river winding along its floor. After a grueling day of navigating rocky tracks, we descended into the valley at twilight. We set up our tent under a canopy of ghost gums by the river, the only souls in this remote haven. That night, after a hearty meal and the comforting crackle of the campfire, we curled up in our sleeping bags and quickly succumbed to sleep. In the dead of night, a loud clatter jolted me awake. From within our tent, I listened intently, but the silence returned. Assuming it was the local wildlife, I drifted back to sleep. Come dawn, stepping out to stretch, I was struck by an unsettling feeling. Our camp was askew. One chair was oddly placed by the table, and a loaf of bread, which I was certain we'd stored, was now out and partially eaten with clear bite marks. Jess denied getting up, and our belongings seemed untouched, yet distinct footprints circled the 4WD, not ours, and they hadn't been there the day before. The unnerving possibility that we weren't alone, that someone had been lurking around our site in the dead of night, set us on edge. We considered leaving but decided to stay, bolstered by the false security of the rifle we had brought along. Later, I ventured alone to explore the ruins of an old homestead, the site of an infamous unsolved murder from the early 1900s. On my return, Jess met me halfway across the field, panic etched on her face. She had seen an old man across the river who vanished into the bush as their eyes met. This man, she described, was like something out of time, ancient, with tattered clothes. We scoured the valley in the 4WD, searching for any sign of a camp or the mysterious old man, to no avail. As dusk approached, the unsettling encounter weighed heavily on us. With the rifle by our side, we tried to relax by the fire, but our nerves were frayed. The final straw came when Jess and I, accompanied by the other to the makeshift toilet, spotted the old man at our camp, eerily close to the unattended rifle. He was an oddity, adorned with homemade clothes and bone accessories, carrying a piece of antler. His casual demeanor was unnerving as he engaged in small talk, alluding to his familiarity with the area and his disapproval of hunting in the valley. His departure was as silent and mysterious as his arrival, vanishing into the night without a trace. That was enough for us. We packed up hastily and left under the cloak of darkness, the valley's mysteries and the old man's true intentions left undiscovered. On the drive back, Jess discovered our camera was missing its memory card, a chilling detail that added to our unease. Back home, our tale prompted a friend's father to reveal we'd likely encountered the Button Man, a reclusive bushman known for unsettling encounters and linked to numerous unsolved disappearances in the high country. The more we learned, the more we realized how close we had come to becoming part of the high country's dark folklore. It's a trip we won't be making again, and a reminder that some legends are rooted in terrifying truths. Story 4. My name is Colin, and I'll recount an incident that's forced me to question the very fabric of reality. It took place in the overgrown wilderness of the Appalachian Trail, where the trees tell stories older than time and the nights are an orchestra of nature's whispers. My friends and I, all outdoor enthusiasts, embarked on what we expected to be a thrilling camping trip to a place we ironically dubbed Dead Man's Forest because of its chilling local legends. We had pitched our tents in a quaint clearing, surrounded by gnarled oaks and the constant murmur of a nearby brook. The day passed with laughter and exploration, but as night cloaked the woods, an inexplicable unease crept over us. The crackling campfire and our jovial stories couldn't ward off the dense atmosphere that had begun to suffocate our spirits. With the full moon overhead, casting an eerie glow, we heard it, a soft, melodic whistling weaving through the trees. It was oddly harmonious, yet it carried a warning that pricked at our instincts. Initially, we assumed it was another group of hikers, but the tune was archaic, a melody that seemed out of place in the modern world. As the whistling grew nearer, my friend Alex, an aficionado of local folklore, turned pale. He whispered to us about the whistler, a spectral figure said to wander these parts, its presence an omen of misfortune. We scoffed, but the laughter died in our throats when the whistling abruptly stopped and the forest fell silent, too silent. The tension became palpable, and our group huddled closer to the dying embers of the fire, as if the light was our last bastion against the creeping darkness. Suddenly, a gust of wind extinguished our flames, plunging us into darkness, and the whistling resumed, now right at the edge of our campsite. Fueled by fear, we scrambled to our tents, zipping ourselves in, hoping the thin fabric would shield us from whatever was outside. We lay in silence, each of us holding our breaths, listening to the haunting tune that seemed to circle us. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the whistling stopped. As dawn broke, we emerged to a scene of chaos. Our campsite was ravaged, tents overturned, and belongings strewn about. Strangely, there were no footprints, no signs of animal disturbance, only the remnants of our terror from the night before. We packed up in silence and left without looking back, the sound of the whistling still ringing in our ears. We've never spoken of it since, and we've all but sworn off camping. The melody haunts my dreams, a siren song of the wild that calls to me, tempting me with its secrets and its terror. The whistler of Dead Man's Forest remains an enigma, a chilling reminder that some things in this world defy explanation and that some places are better left unvisited by man. Story 5. We have to travel back in time to 1988 in order to establish the scene for this tale. The Oregon Cascade Mountains serve as the setting. I was 10 years old, and our golden retriever, Amber, as well as my parents and best friend were with me. We were an outdoor family, having gone camping numerous times both before and after, but even now, when I think back on it, I can still remember the fear I experienced that long ago weekend. It sort of came back to the forefront of my thoughts after a recent brief conversation with my father. He was also able to clarify some information I had forgotten. On this holiday, as with many others, we piled into the station wagon and headed out for a hike to one of our favorite lakes where we would camp. The fact that this was my birthday weekend and I got to choose this lake added to the excitement of this trip for me. My father pulled out his sidearm and fastened it to his belt once we had reached the trailhead and put our packs on. There was always an extra sense of security when my dad was in the woods because open carry was allowed in national forests in Oregon. He also always carried a gun on his hip. It came in handy once when we had a near accident with a bear. The lake was approximately 4 miles away and required a moderate hike through some dense forest, but the trail was kept up nicely and never very crowded, making the hike enjoyable. We let Amber run and do her thing as we began our hike because, in the 1980s, it was normal to walk dogs off leash on forest trails. She was a good dog who never ran off or attacked someone. She did, however, adore people, and speaking of people, after hiking for about 2 miles, we had not encountered another hiker, which was pleasant because it meant that we could spend time together talking alone. Story 6. My name is Emma, and there's an experience I had while camping that still lingers with me. Its mystery is dense as the fog that shrouds Mount Hiraeth. It's a mountain shrouded in tales of the supernatural, where the trees are said to be ancient guardians of long-forgotten secrets, and the mist is a veil between worlds. A group of us, all seasoned campers, had sought the thrill of the untouched wilderness, where the land whispers of a time before man. We found a spot nestled in a valley where the trees parted to reveal the sky, a perfect viewing spot for stargazing. The day was spent in high spirits, hiking and sharing stories of the mountain's myths. As dusk embraced the mountain, we noticed the peculiar formation of the trees. They formed a near-perfect circle around a stone slab that seemed to serve as an altar. It was an oddity that none of us had ever encountered in our collective years of camping. We joked about ancient druid rituals and poured a little wine onto the stone as an offering to the spirits of the mountain, laughing off the unease that it brought. Nightfall brought a pressing silence, the kind that feels like a weight upon one's chest. We gathered around the fire, but the flames seemed to struggle against the stillness of the air. That's when the mist began to roll in, thick and enveloping, obscuring everything beyond our circle. It felt alive, purposeful, and with it came a cold that seeped into our bones. We decided to retreat into our tents, seeking warmth and a respite from the eerie atmosphere. Sleep, however, eluded us. The silence of the mountain was suffocating, and the air within the tents became oppressively stale. I decided to brave the outside for some fresh air, only to find that the mist had formed a dense wall around our campsite, the stone slab now barely visible at its center. That's when I saw them, the shadows within the mist, human in form but impossibly still. A circle of figures, holding hands, surrounding us. My heart raced, and I called out, but there was no response, only the echo of my own voice against an impenetrable silence. I woke my friends, and together we watched, helpless and horrified, as the figures seemed to sway gently, a silent dance to a silent tune. We dared not approach, but primal part of our brains warning us of danger. With the first light of dawn, the mist receded like a tide, and the figures vanished with it. The circle was empty save for the stone, which now bore carvings that none of us remembered seeing the day before, symbols that seemed to twist and writhe before our eyes. We packed up with haste, leaving Mount Hiraeth behind, but the memory of that night haunts me. Sometimes, in the stillness of my room, I swear I can feel the cold mist and see the shadows swaying. It's a reminder that some places are alive, breathing entities that watch and wait, and should you find yourself within their grasp, not all of you may find your way back. And there you have it, friends, tales of the unknown that remind us that the world is full of mysteries and the unknown. We've journeyed together through the whispers of the wild and stared into the abyss of our darkest fears. We hope these stories have left you intrigued, perhaps a little unsettled, but most importantly, we hope they've sparked a flame of curiosity within you. As the night deepens and you find yourself glancing over your shoulder, we invite you to share your thoughts with us. Have you ever encountered something unexplainable in the wilderness? Do you dare to venture into the forest after hearing these tales? Comment below with your stories or thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. And if you've enjoyed this adventure, please subscribe to Teddy's Nightmares for more encounters with the eerie and the unexplained. Hit the like button if you felt a shiver down your spine tonight, and share this video with those who relish a good mystery. See you in the next video.